As a Kansas Citian born and raised, I, of course, am a proud Kansas City football fan. But I gotta say, as a kid growing up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't always so easy to be a fan. There were some highlight moments, sure, but it was also full of a lot of letdowns. That all changed in the 2019-2020 season when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl for their second time ever in 70 years.
Chiefs are Super Bowl champions here in Miami.
After 50 years of waiting, the Kansas City Chiefs are taking home the Super Bowl trophy for just the second time in team history.
That 2020 win started our most recent dynasty status.
How about those?
And I'm proud of my guys, man. This is awesome. It's legendary.
5 Super Bowl appearances in the past 6 years, Kansas City is showcasing more on the national and international stage. And every year, controversies and conversations come up about some aspects of Chiefs fandom, like the name itself and the tomahawk chop, which we're not going to play because a lot of people, including me, find it offensive, even if it's impossible to ignore at the games. I am truly so excited about our team's recent success, but to be real, it feels kind of complicated to be a Chiefs fan. So how did all this come to be in the first place?
In recent years, the movement to eradicate offensive Native American language has sparked a national conversation.
As an Indigenous person, being in Kansas City and seeing all this, you can't even go in the grocery store without seeing a steak that's called a tomahawk chop. I mean, it's it's unreal.
A majority of fans aren't surprised by the Kansas City Chiefs' decision to ban the wearing of Native American headdresses and face paint.
It's just unacceptable in this day and age. And frankly, Kansas City deserves better than that.
This is A People's History of Kansas City. I'm Suzanne Hogan. On this episode, it's how the Kansas City Chiefs got their name. Like, did you know we could have been called the Kansas City Texans? For real, that wouldn't have been more confusing.
We are trying to establish a foothold in the city. We cannot establish a foothold by calling ourselves the Texans, for God's sake.
Or what about the Kansas City Mules, Stars, or even the Kansas City Royals, only as a football team? I know, it's wild to imagine. The story of the Chiefs is linked to the region's indigenous past, but it also has to do with a peculiar Kansas City politician and a fan contest. And it remains both a point of pride for some and pain for others.
The Kansas City Chiefs rank among the most entertaining of teams in this most entertaining of sports.
Professional football in mid-America was all its boosters said it would be. It was exciting, often spectacular, never dull, and the future for the Kansas City Chiefs, unlimited.
So I do think it's important to first point out the names Kansas City and Missouri, where the Kansas City Chiefs are based today. Both those names are connected to our region's indigenous history. We've done a few episodes on that. If you haven't already, check out Where Missouri Got Its Name, or Was Kansas City Almost Called Possum Trot? To understand the origins of the Chiefs name, I reached out to Michael McCambridge. He's the author of 2 books about the history of football, America's Game, the epic story of how pro football captured a nation, and 69 Chiefs, a team, a season, and the birth of modern Kansas City. He's also a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan.
Guilty, yes.
The dynasty, as we know it today, originally started in Texas, back in the late 1950s with Lamar Hunt, the son of a very rich oil tycoon.
He was shy by nature. The place where he found refuge was in sports.
A football player himself, Lamar Hunt loved everything about sports.
The competition, the pageantry, the color, the excitement. And so he decided in the late 50s he wanted to own a professional sports franchise.
For a little background here, the NFL, the National Football League, was already around. It got started in 1920, and Lamar Hunt tried to get people in that league to sell him a team or to see if they wanted to expand. But he wasn't having any luck.
There was someone in Denver who wanted to start a pro football team. There was someone in Minneapolis. There was someone in Houston. He realized, why don't I talk to all these people and start another league?
I made an effort to get a National Football League team for Dallas, tried to purchase an existing team, talk to them about expansion, and to make a long story short, that led to the formation of the American Football League.
The year was 1960, and Hunt's new AFL team, the Dallas Texans, was one of 3 pro football teams in the state.
You had the Dallas Cowboys and Dallas Texans in Dallas, and you had the Houston Oilers of the AFL in Houston.
After just a couple years, Lamar Hunt realized this was too much competition within the state of Texas.
He could not keep losing millions and millions of dollars every year. He might have been able to technically afford it, but it wasn't good for the league. And so in the fall of 1962, he very furtively began casting about for possible relocation candidates. I know he checked out New Orleans.
No owner, no team, nothing was ever courted with more zest and enthusiasm than were Hunt and the Texans.
At one point, the mayor of Kansas City, H.R.O. Bartle, learned that Lamar had been in Atlanta scouting that out, and he flew directly to Dallas and sat down with Lamar in his office and said, please consider Kansas City.
Kansas City Mayor H.R.O. Bartle, like a lot of other city leaders, saw a huge opportunity.
There was also a sense on the part of Mayor Bartle, this larger-than-life, 320-pound, relentlessly optimistic man, that having a football team was one of the things that connoted major league status on a city.
Kansas City and the entire area made it readily apparent that they wanted the Texans and were prepared to do more than talk about it.
That's from the film Kansas City Chiefs Football Highlights, 63. And this is from an old speech by Mayor Bartle.
I have seen here tonight fellowship in its finest and in its best form, and I like it.
Bartle made a compelling case to Lamar Hunt. There were no other pro football teams close in the area. Their lease for the first 2 seasons would be $1 a year. And the business community would support the team by promising to sell a certain number of tickets. And I have to mention, Bartle was a real character. He loved cigars. He was a philanthropist, lawyer, and was a leader for the Boy Scouts.
How would you girls like to see me sometime in my Boy Scout shorts? Now that's something to see.
It was in scouting where Bartle landed his nickname, Chief, which is just one of the many things Galen Krauser takes issue with about him.
He was the founder of the tribe of Mickasay, which is not an actual federally recognized tribe of American Indians. It's a made-up tribe that, plays Indian.
Galen is the executive director of the Kansas City Indian Center.
And I'm a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, Hunkpapa and Oglala.
She also has been an outspoken advocate against the chief's name.
It's problematic and offensive because it really contributes to the erasure of who we actually are as human beings.
Bartle claimed he was inducted into an Arapaho tribe and given the name Chief Lone Bear, and he formed a Boy Scout group called Mickasay. The organization's site says they loosely blend aspects of American Indian heritage with the ideals of scouting. It still exists in Missouri today.
It adds insult, I think, to the whole fact that not only are you bastardizing our culture, you are doing it in a state that didn't want us to be here, and nobody even knows.
Missouri's history of handling indigenous tribes has been historically bad, which is an extra point of pain for Galen. Native people were displaced and discriminated against, and they were not allowed to speak their languages or practice their customs.
I think that that's part of it for me, too, is just the lack of knowledge about surrounding all of that, or how long those songs that they're pretending to sing were illegal for us to sing.
So all of this is important context going into the deal with Texans owner Lamar Hunt, who was on the verge of moving the franchise to Kansas City.
And then all that was left was deciding what to call the team.
It was May 1963, and if you can believe it, yes, Lamar Hunt almost went with calling the team the Kansas City Texans.
Lamar was pretty set on it. He felt as though it was intrinsic to the team's identity. He made the point to those who disagreed with him that the Brooklyn Dodgers had remained the Dodgers when they moved to Los Angeles. And even more to the point, in the NBA, the Minneapolis Lakers remained the Lakers when they moved to Los Angeles. Not that there's that many lakes in the Los Angeles area.
Luckily, he was swayed against that idea and announced in the Kansas City Star that they were having a Rename the Dallas Texans contest. And this call out for ideas received more than 4,000 entries.
All sorts of suggestions, Royals, American Royals, Monarchs after the team's Negro Leagues, Mules. One of the suggestions was calling the team the Kansas City Mo-Cans to denote Missouri and Kansas.
Other personal favorites: the Dandelions, Tornadoes, Wranglers, Hunters, Scouts.
But the name that was ultimately decided upon by Lamar was the Chiefs.
The Kansas City Call reported Lamar Hunt decided on that name to honor the Native American heritage in the area, and because of Mayor Bartle's nickname, the Chief. He also said it sounded classy, was short, and would look good in a headline. Hunt designed the Arrowhead logo with the iconic interlocking K and C. There was another, more problematic early Chiefs logo that showed a cartoon Native American chief in full headdress running across the middle of the United States, but they eventually got rid of that one. Hunt also decided the team's colors, which, if it had been his first choice, would have been Columbia blue and white. Instead, Hunt got his second choice, red and gold. Michael says that very first season in 1963 as the Kansas City Chiefs was kind of rough.
I can remember Lamar saying as he was looking out at the sparse crowd, he was thinking to himself, "Oh Lord, have I made a huge mistake?"
Ticket sales were not as high as had been promised, and the players and coaches faced a lot of criticism.
Lamar developed an ad campaign that sort of made light of all the people behind the Chiefs bench who were criticizing the Chiefs. The Kansas City Star had run a story calling that area of the stadium the Wolf Pack because they were always howling about one thing or another. And so that prompted the big ad campaign of the Wolf Pack and inviting people to join the Wolf Pack ahead of the 1966 season.
And this year marked a turning point for the team and the sport at large. It was announced that the NFL and the AFL were going to come together, which started the Super Bowl, another name created by Lamar Hunt. This game would be the ultimate battle.
And then in 1966, that first year of the merger, the Chiefs win the AFL title and, of course, go to the first Super Bowl, January 15, 1967, against the Packers.
The Chiefs lost that one, but then a few years later, they were in it again, and led by Hall of Fame coach Hank Stram and quarterback Len Dawson, 1970 marked an epic Super Bowl win.
For Hank Stram and the Chiefs, only one goal remained: to be champions again.
Fast forward to the 1990s, and the Chiefs were again at a turning point. They had an incredibly popular stadium, a younger audience, but a new, controversial fan tradition, the tomahawk chop, which actually first started with the Florida State University football team. Eventually, the Atlanta Braves baseball team also adopted it. It first came to the Chiefs in the early 90s when a Northwest Missouri State marching band performed it at a game, and it caught on with the fans.
There was a lot of discussion, and ultimately the team's policy and perspective was, we intend no offense, so therefore no one should be offended. But to this day, I am still deeply uncomfortable with the tomahawk chop.
20 years ago, the American Psychological Association released a recommendation that all Native imagery and mascots should be changed. The Chiefs organization has responded to some of the problematic things. They retired war paint, a horse that used to run around the field after touchdowns, and they've banned headdresses and face paint inside the stadium, though headdresses still pop up at tailgates and other venues. The organization says they're working with a group of Native American leaders to address other concerns too, and to, quote, promote awareness and understanding of Native cultures and tribes, according to their website. But for Galen Krauser, it's not enough.
They've pulled back and they've pulled back and they've pulled back, and it's always in response to what the fans and to what the community will allow. And until Kansas City and Kansas City fans start saying, we really want something different, I'm not sure what it's going to take for them to make those changes. And we just kind of got to ask ourselves as Kansas Cityans, how do we want to be represented in the world? Because the world's watching.
Galen is part of Not in Our Honor, a group of activists calling for the removal of all Indigenous imagery in sports. The group protests Kansas City home games and is asking the Chiefs to change their name and once and for all stop the tomahawk chop. It's unclear if that day will ever come, but in the meantime, some fans have taken it upon themselves to show their love for the team in other ways, by refusing to participate in the chop, calling it out, and creating their own spin-off swag. I know I've been a real fan of the Kansas City Chefs shirts I've seen around town. Writer Michael McCambridge and activist Galen Krauser have some other ideas, too.
I would have no problem being the Kansas City Wolves.
Maybe they should again do a contest and see where people are with it.
There isn't an easy way to support my team while also being against and embarrassed by some of it. But if there's one thing we can learn from the past, it's that things like names and trends aren't set in stone. They can change. And it's the fan base, in the end, that holds that power to make it happen. A People's History of Kansas City was reported, produced, and mixed this month by me, Suzanne Hogan, with major help from MVP producer Olivia Hewitt, and editing by Luke Martin and Mackenzie Martin. You heard sounds from WJTV 12 News, CBS Sports, ABC News, KSHB 41, 1964 Chiefs Football Highlights presented by BC Christopher and Company, Kansas City Chiefs Football Highlights 63 Professional Football in Mid-America, The History of the Kansas City Chiefs 1960 to 2020, H. Rowe Bartle Selected Speeches, ESPN Classic, and YouTube channels Chiefs Country and Mark Willens. Music is by Blue Dot Sessions. We're a production of KCUR Studios, a podcast network in Kansas City, Missouri. And did you know that A People's History of Kansas City started the same year as the Kansas City Chiefs started its most recent winning streak? Yeah, the 2019-2020 season. I've long joked that we're somehow behind it. I'll happily take credit for it. All that's to say, make sure you're subscribed to this show because we'll be back next month with another episode about the visionaries, underdogs, and renegades who shaped Kansas City and the region. Until then, I'm Suzanne Hogan. Thanks for listening. And let's go, Kansas City.